Man, I was gonna ask y'all how y'all were doing tonight, but I'm pretty sure you just told me. So, as you saw from that video, we have Galentine's coming up on February 10th for all the ladies in this room that are wanting to go. It is $25 if you bring a friend and use code SWIFTY. It'll be free for them. And the theme is Taylor Swift. You're supposed to dress up in your favorite color of era for Taylor Swift. If y'all know what colors those are, personally I don't, but that's what that is. And then we have Mission Arlington coming up. Sign-ups are online app under Bridge Builders. It is June 9th through the 14th, and it is $400 cost. And as you saw from that video, man, guys, God just really moves in Mission Arlington. You saw how they were worshiping. You saw how we were worshiping. It's not only a way for us to help other people learn about Jesus, but a way for us to grow our relationships ourselves. So after talking about that, if you guys haven't already noticed, I'm not Pastor Riley or Mitchell. They are both gone today, and so I thought I'd take the show. So tonight the order is going to be a little different. As you guys probably noticed, we're not doing worship before the sermon. And that is because I'm going to be talking to y'all about worship. And not just worship is what I'm going to be talking to y'all about. I'm going to be talking to y'all about being a living sacrifice. You see, when I was writing my sermon, I was really looking for a verse that really describes what worship is, really tells us what worship is. And I saw there was a ton of stories in the Bible about worship. You know, there's a story where Paul and Silas, they were preaching the gospel, and they got put into prison because they were preaching the gospel, and they sat there, and when they had nothing left, they chose to worship. And when they chose to worship, they were set free, and God really moved in their worship. You know, that's a great story. It's a great story. I'm not saying it's not, but this is the verse, when I finally found this verse, I was like, man, that's the one I got to use. And this verse is found in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. And this verse says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God, because of all he has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind he will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect." And I read this verse and I just knew. I knew this verse was the one I had to use. Because what it tells us is that in our worship, how do we worship God? We need to worship God by being a living sacrifice to him. And you know, that kind of leads me to what my sermon is about. My sermon is about being a living sacrifice to God. And if you're anything like me, that probably sounds a little confusing at first. I was like, a living sacrifice, how do I do that? How do I be a living sacrifice for God? Well, as soon as I read this verse, this story came to mind. And I feel like this gives us a pretty good example of being a living sacrifice. The story we're going to be in today in the Bible is Job. So if any of you have your Bibles you want to keep up, I'm going to be in Job almost the whole time. And so in chapter 1 of Job, we start in chapter 1, and it tells us, the first verse, it's very important, okay? It's talking about Job, and it says, "There once was a man named Job who lived in the land of Uz. He was blameless, a man of complete integrity. He feared God and stayed away from evil." From this alone, you'd assume this is a man of great faith. Great faith. He never did anything wrong. He was blameless. He had great integrity, and he lived his life as a living sacrifice for God. And I feel like that's what in Romans 12, God calls us to do. He calls us to be a living sacrifice for him. And after all this, after it tells us that he had thousands of animals, servants to take care of those animals. He had a great big family, and God had blessed him with all these things. And after it tells us this in chapter 1, it takes us all the way to a heavenly court, where God is doing God things, and Satan comes up and is like, I've been looking around, I've been doing all this stuff, and God says, well, look over here. Look at Job. And here's what God says about Job. God basically says that Job is a blameless man who has done nothing wrong. It's the same as verse 1, but God is saying it from his own words, which means we know it's true. We know Job is a blameless man. But here's where Satan gets a little tricky, you know? Satan loves to be sneaky, he loves to do tricky things. And so what he noticed is like, well, of course he would worship you. He has look at all the things you've given him. Look at what you've blessed him with. Of course he would worship you. What would happen if I took it away? So here's what God told him. God told him, you can attack him. You can take away his stuff, but the one thing you can't do is you cannot physically harm him. So what did Satan do? He attacked. Satan attacked. And three messengers that day came to Job. 3 messengers simultaneously came to Job. The first one was like, dude, all your animals, all your servants have either been taken or they've been killed. And, that's bad news. That's bad news for Job, right? He was a rich man. He had all these things. He had things to do, things to pay for. And he lost it all. And then one of those servants, the last one, comes up to him and says, all your children have been killed. They were meeting up for a dinner. The house collapsed. It says great wind came through. And they were all killed. And a lot of us, if that happened to us, we'd be like, you know what, our life's over. What do I do now? I give up. Why would God do this to me? But that's what we'd expect Job to do. But here's what it says Job did. It said, after all of this, Job tore his robe off and fell to the ground in worship. Would any of you do that? Be honest. Raise your hand if you do that. Yeah. I wouldn't either. Don't think I would. But then it says, in all of this, Job did not sin. And I don't know about you, but if this happened to me, I don't know what I could do. I'd want to give up. There's so much going on in his life at once. He loses everything. And I forgot to mention, not only did that happen, his own house blew down. And he still chose to worship God. And to me, it's such a crazy idea that all this would happen. It would make me question everything I really know about God. Because I lost everything, but he still worshiped God. But guess what? The day that couldn't get any worse only gets worse. After this, Satan goes back to God. He goes back to God, and God's like, look at Job. He hasn't done anything. He's still worshiping me. He got on his knees and worshiped me. And Satan said, well, yeah, you let me take away his stuff, but I'm sure if I attacked his health, then he'd quit. Why would he worship a God who's hurting? And why would he worship a God who's doing this to him? So Satan goes back and attacks. And it says that Job's body was covered head to toe in terrible boils, and he grabbed a piece of pottery to scrape them off. And even his wife told him to just curse God and die. And Job replies with, listen to this. Job replies with, you talk like a foolish woman. Should we accept only good things from the hand of God and never the bad? Also in all this, Job still did nothing wrong. His own wife came up to him and said, he should just curse God and die. And he said, you foolish woman, what are you talking about? God gave me all this stuff, and just because he took it away, you expect me to curse him, not love him anymore, not worship him anymore? And in all that, Job still did not sin. He experienced the only thing that worse could have happened is he could have died. And honestly, to him, that might have not been worse in the moment. He was suffering. He scraped the boils off with pottery. But if we really think about what I said at the beginning, was Romans 12, 1 through 2. And what did it say? It said, be a living sacrifice. And what that means is no matter what happens, good or bad, worship God. And that's what Job did. That's what Job did. Job had the worst of the worst happen to him, but yet he worshiped God. So what I would tell you the first step of living as a living, worshiping sacrifice to God is, well, it's in the name. I would tell you need to worship. Okay, good or bad, whether he's blessing you or you're losing things, whether you're being attacked by Satan or not, you need to worship God. And then so chapter 2 ends with his friends coming up to him, and it says they sat in silence next to Job because the suffering was too bad for words. And if you ask me, this is a perfect example of being a living sacrifice, right? Living sacrifice to worship God. That is literally the description of the verse I read to you guys at the beginning. But you see, it almost makes the whole thing look easy. It almost makes it seem like, oh, everything bad's gonna happen. All we need to do is get on our knees and worship God. Let's be honest, that's not easy. There's some of you that I'm sure have lost your phones and sinned. Job lost everything. And it only happens when you stop at chapter 2 where it seems like it's easy, but that's why you gotta keep reading. That's why you gotta keep reading. As you go through the story, Job knows he's innocent. Job knows he did nothing wrong, and these bad things were happening to him. But his friends, they're like, nah, you had to have. They believed in this idea of God, that God is only going to do bad things to you when you do bad things. That was their idea of God. And Job was like, there's no way. But they slowly started to corrupt Job's mind almost and making him almost think he did something wrong. But then he goes away from it. In chapter 9, verses 21 through 24, it says, I am innocent, but it makes no difference to me. I despise my life. Innocent or wicked, it is all the same to God. That's why I say he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. When a plague sweeps through, he laughs at the death of the innocent. The whole earth is in the hands of the wicked, and God blinds the eyes of the judges. If he's not the one who does it, who is? You see, he begins to have this idea of God, that God is an unjust God. That because he did one thing, because he might have done one thing wrong, because his friends are telling him he did something wrong, he's being convinced that God is an unjust God, and that even though he did nothing wrong, that God is still treating him badly. And it gets to the point where Job gets fed up with his friends telling him these things, and he decides, you know what? I'm going to take this right up with God. Does that not sound crazy to anybody else? Take it up with God? Does that not sound like a losing battle? I don't know about you, but if I had a problem, I am not going to go to God and be, you're wrong. When is God wrong? He basically goes to God and he's like, you know what, I'm going to take it up with God. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't do that. So what is another step I would say that helps you stay in this like area of being a living sacrifice for God? I would tell you that it's important to watch out for the temptations that Satan's going to put in front of you and the tricks he's going to try and make you fall for. See, like some people would say that all this stuff happened to Job because, God wanted it to, right? But God did tell Satan he could attack him. That did happen. And that was a way of preparing Job for his future. You see, Job was running into all these problems, all these things, and all his friends were telling him was that you must have done something wrong for God to treat you this way. But it tells us that Satan's the one who attacks him. So I would tell you to watch out for those things. And in this moment in the story, Job is on an emotional roller coaster. He's been living his whole life knowing that God is a just God. But because of everything happening, he's beginning to question that. He's beginning to wonder, is God just? Are we sure that God is a just God? Are we sure that he treats us all fairly? Are we sure this has all happened? So what does he do? He gives a final statement of innocence to God. He gives a final statement for his innocence and demands an answer. And it's in this moment that Job's last friend showed up. There was one more friend that showed up, and what does he tell him? It says that he told him that you need to repent for the things you have said. Because God, you might not see it now, right? It's all about perspective. You might have not seen it now, what God was doing. It might look like God was treating you bad now, but what if he's just preparing you for something in the future? What if he sees something coming ahead in your life that he doesn't want you to have to deal with that without already having a prior experience, a prior thing to prepare you with your relationship with God and that, so he's just preparing you for it. You see, it's important to realize that God works in weird ways, and we're not always going to see the way he's working. But Job demands this answer from God. And his friend tells him to repent because he doesn't see what's happening in the future. But listen to me, guys. He's going through it, all right? He's had the worst things ever. Some of y'all might be going through it too. Some of y'all's home lives might not be the best. Some of y'all's family lives might not be the best. But what if that is God preparing you to be the father or the mother to your child that you never had, that you wish you had? What if it's him preparing you for something in your future? Maybe you're struggling with stuff at school right now. Maybe you're struggling with friends right now. Maybe you're struggling with a sin right now. But maybe there is something in your life that's coming up that God is preparing you for so you can deal with it when it gets here. You see, Job had demanded this answer from God. He had demanded this answer from God. And he's been waiting for it, waiting. And God responds, though. You see, we get into chapter 38. I don't have time to read the whole thing. But we get into chapter 38, and God finally responds to Job, and he says, where were you when I laid down the foundations of this earth? Where were you when I stopped the tides on the shore? Where were you when I created this earth, when I created all the stars in the sky? Where were you, and who are you to tell me what I am to do? And what we get from this is that we shouldn't doubt God and what he is doing. We shouldn't doubt God and what he is doing. If the worship band's in here, if I can go ahead and ask y'all to come up, that would be great. So basically, we can't doubt God, because what did Job say? Job demanded an answer, and God gave him it. And what God told him is he has a plan. He has a plan for his life, and not only does he have a plan for Job's life, but he has a plan for yours. There might be something going on right now, but God's working. It's not always going to be easy. This story shows us that it's not going to be easy. Job struggled. Job was struggling through this. And I'm not going to lie, it hasn't always been easy for me. If you don't know... Check. All right. If you don't know me very well, you would know that 4 years ago, my mom passed away from cancer. And that wasn't an easy part in my life. And if you think I was fully being a living sacrifice to God, you'd be wrong. Because I wasn't. There was a time in my life where I'd get on my knees, be crying to God, asking, why would you do this to me? If you are a just God, if you love me so much, how could you do this to me? And we're all going to have moments like that. I don't know what every single one of you is struggling with. I don't know what every single one of you is going through, but just know God is there and God is moving. And so tonight, the main goal I'm trying to get across to y'all guys is that worship is important, and being a living sacrifice to God is important. Worship through the hard times, worship in the good times. We were made to worship. There's this worship song, and it says, what the enemy meant for evil, he'll use it for good. No matter what is going on in your life, you could be coming here because this is a safe place for you. You could be coming here because you don't want to be home because there's stuff going on there that you don't want to be around. You could be here because there's so many things going wrong in your life, and this is the one place where you feel safe. Or you could be here for friends. I don't know. But whatever evil Satan is trying to use in your life, God has a plan, and he is going to use it for good. You see, there's this song that we're about to go into. It's called Worthy. In my favorite part of the song, it says, be exalted now in the heavens as your glory fills this place. You alone deserve our praise. You're the name above all names. See, if there's one person in this universe of ours, one person that we can know, that we can turn to all the time, it is God. He has known the plan for every single one of your lives before you were thousands of years ago. He knew. And what the enemy means for evil, he's going to use it for good. So if we need to do anything, that is worship God. If y'all want to go ahead and stand up with me, make your way down front, because we're going to be going into worship after this. Or spread out, make your way up down front, wherever you want to be, and just bow your heads and close your eyes. You see, we're going to go... You see, as we go into this time of worship, there's this mindset we should have going into it. Look at the story of Job that I just talked about. Look at everything Job went through. Job lost everything. But God was still with him. There's probably so many things going on in your life that you're like, there's no way God is moving. There's no way God is watching over me. But let me tell you, you might be laying there at night crying yourself to sleep. God's there. God's watching, and he's probably saying, you don't know it yet, but you're going to do great things. You don't know it yet, but I'm using this situation to help you grow. You don't know it yet, but this situation is going to change your life forever. So as we go into this song called Worthy, I want y'all to just really close your eyes, focus, tune out all the people around you. Don't let anyone distract you. And just ask God to move in your life. Ask God to work into your life. Worship is so important. If you have anything going on in your life, lay it down. Lay it down to him. Ask him to take care of it. Ask him to know, because in God's time, everything's going to go how it's supposed to. Let's worship.